Can anyone hear me?
Ready when you are, Chair.
Thanks, Cal. Welcome everybody to this evening's planning meeting. For those who are watching on YouTube, as it's a virtual meeting, if you can bear with us if we have any technical issues, and we'll try and resolve them as quickly as possible. Any speakers will be introduced by name as they're brought into the meeting, so everyone knows who they are. The order of the events tonight will be that we'll have the officers' update, officers' report, we'll hear from any speakers present, we'll have a members' debate. I'll state the recommendation to be voted on, seek a seconder or an approver. We'll have a vote, which will be named votes, and then we'll state the decision at the end. Do we have any apologies, Callum?
No
apologies,
sorry,
Stephen, isn't it? Sorry. Any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of December. Is everyone happy they're a true record? Getting lots of nods, no shaking of heads. Excellent. There are no urgent items. Speakers, we've got a number of speakers tonight. So what I intend to do is run them in order of 5.2, then 5.3, then we'll do 5.1, 5.4, 5.5 afterwards. Okay. So if we make a start with 5.2, which I believe is Richard.
Thank you, Chair. There's no update on this item.
Okay. Do you want to run the report?
Just bringing the presentation up now.
Okay, so this is an application for a new access and alteration to land levels at 17 Kettering Road in Burton Latimer.
You apologise or try again with that?
Okay, thank you. So this is the location plan. This shows the site just to the east of Kettering Road in Burton Latimer, and you can see running to the northeast from the house number 17 there, through the adjacent site at Spring Gardens, the access that links into the rest of Spring Gardens itself. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that's the block plan on the bottom left, just showing in the sort of dark grey the area where the new access is to be proposed with the parking for number 17. At the top right, you can see the location plan of the site, and also in blue, the land that's in the same ownership. And in the committee report, you'll see that there's an approval dated from 2019 for conversion of those barns at the front within the blue land to a dwelling. Next slide, please. So this is the site itself. You can see the site runs to the northeast of the house. Between that and Spring Gardens, which you can see as labelled on that diagram there, is a private drive, unadopted road. You'll see there's presented to committee because there's 12 objections to the application. A number of those, as I cover in the report, are related to sort of private matters around the sort of rights of that access to the land, and some raising sort of technical issues. Important to probably note the land levels on the site. You can see at the top there, you've got the section DD and then the section CC. So you can see what's happening is the site at the moment, as in that section DD, is slightly higher than Spring Gardens itself. So what's happening, as you can see in that section CC, is proposed to take some of the land away to have the central access point at a sort of consistent level with the existing levels on Spring Gardens, and then sort of the ramped sort of parking areas either side of that access point. Next slide, please. So as part of the application, there were some concerns covered in the committee report, some concerns about parking. So the applicant has produced these manoeuvring diagrams which show that vehicles can enter and exit the site quite easily. Next slide, please. So this is the site itself. So you've got number 17 there on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side there, you've got some coniferous hedging through which there would be the access point. And beyond that, to the rear is the sort of garden of number 17, which would remain through this application. Next slide, please. So this is showing, just looking through the boundary which is shared to those properties on Spring Gardens. Next slide, please. And this is Spring Gardens itself. So this was a modern development of 4 detached properties. You can see in the background there, you've got number 17 Kettering Road at the rear. You can see that close boarded fence in the background there, just beyond that white vehicle. And it's in that sort of central position, just to the right of that white vehicle, where the access point would be created, with that changes in land levels that I showed you on that section CC previously. Next slide, please. If you just go back to sort of the cross section, Callum, please, that'd be great. Yeah, so as covered, it's presented to me because of those objections. It's an access onto a private drive, so that wouldn't in itself need planning permission. It's due to those engineering operations that the scheme itself needs planning permission. Highways have no objection to the scheme. They consider that it's acceptable on sort of technical grounds, and also it's important to highlight that obviously it falls outside of their remit, given that it's an access onto a private drive. A number of those objections in the report have been covered. The civil matters about the sort of right to access that land would be it's fall outside of the planning application. But on sort of technical grounds, as officers, we have no concerns about what is proposed, and given the comfort that's given from the Highway Authority, we've recommended it for approval subject to those conditions, one of which includes sort of construction activity, should the application be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. So I'll read out a statement from Nicola Wright, who's a third-party objector. There's a PowerPoint, I believe, for this as well. So I'll wait for the
Just bringing it up
PowerPoint.
now.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm here before you today to offer objection to this application on behalf of 9, 11, 17 and 23 Spring Gardens. We feel that the application poses safety, structural and environmental risks. We would also challenge the manner in which Mr. Chamberlain claims he is entitled to enter this property with 10 feet of boundary access from Spring Gardens. We have not yet been provided with deeds or covenants that validate these claims. In support of this, please refer to slide 1, which shows a copy of the withdrawn application for the same access, KET 2019-0803, and the LHA response highlighted in red. The LHA statement states that the maximum 5 dwellings are already serviced from the private road from the highway. It has come to our attention that Burton and Latimer Town Council have not been consulted over this application when they are a statutory consultee. The barn occupies an elevated position in relation to the cul-de-sac, slide 2. A sharp slope will need to be constructed to access the parking. Vehicles will need to perform sharp 90-degree turns through the suggested 10-foot high access point, and also whilst on the slope. Initial manoeuvres will need to be performed in the cul-de-sac where space is restricted. The swept path analysis in slide 3 shows this. The white car shown in the photograph is a compact hatchback. The cul-de-sac is in an area where children play. Vehicles reversing sharply from this high vantage point would have significant restricted visibility. Delivery vehicles will not be able to negotiate the incline and small access gap and will need to park outside the current properties. All driveways must be accessible at all time as they are in regular use for school and work commuting and leisure purposes, which cannot be delayed or by obstruction. See slide 4. The application states that a structural wall will need to be built along the boundary line. Whilst the committee will not be considering the inconvenience caused by construction, it would like to state that we will not give permission for him to access our properties to undertake any groundworks. Slide 4 demonstrates the accessibility, demonstrates the inaccessibility. Faced by a cement mixer trying to access the site, even if permission to access the road were granted. The application proposes to replace all of the trees and soil, a natural soak away with hard standing. As the cul-de-sac is on an incline, this will increase water flow down to houses located at the lower end, especially number 23, where the garden already becomes boggy in wet weather. These trees also lie within a conservation area. The work will impact upon appearance of the environment due to loss of the trees. Mr. Chamberlain has had access to his property from the existing entrance while taking ownership. This remains a far better access point for the barn and would provide more usable parking space with safer access for all residents. This would also be more environmentally responsible. The access and parking that he proposes is restrictive, disruptive and unsafe. We ask you to consider this and dismiss this application fully. Thank you. So before we start, I've got 2 questions, Richard. One is regarding to the statement about Burton Latimer Town Council. Can you confirm that they were consulted? And also,
we checked. Yeah, we had a query about this yesterday. They were consulted. The application's been in for some time, since sometime in August last year. I can't tell you the exact date. I don't have the details in front of me, but it's been in for a long time. And the consultation response was due on that initial consultation by October, but wasn't received.
Okay. And the other one comment, if you can just confirm, is by us giving planning permission for this application, we are not given permission to use that private road.
Exactly. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Have we got another speaker, Chair?
Sorry, yes, we have.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clear those points up first.
Bring them through now, Chair.
Hello, Mr. Chamberlain. Hi, you're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, welcome. You've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you for the chair and for giving me the opportunity to talk this evening. My name is Peter Chamberlain and I'm the applicant. Yep.
Yeah, carry on.
Sorry. I registered.
Sorry, Peter, have you got YouTube running in the background?
Oh, have I? Well, sorry, I got rid of that. Right, I wasn't sure if
Yeah.
I was going to get on, was the thing.
Okay, if you want to start again.
Sorry about that. Is that okay?
Yeah, when you're ready.
Okay. I registered to speak really just to make myself available if any questions were requested of me, to be fair. I'm not sure if the protocol allows for that later on or not, but I'm available obviously for answering any questions or to clarify any points. I don't really intend to add to what's been said by Richard in terms of my planning application, as what is being asked of is a relatively small amount of groundworks to adjust levels and create the access. And as it's being recommended for approval and the main consultee Highways has no objections, I'm not sure what I can add to the proposed planning. I appreciate 12 people have expressed concerns. The majority of these have been commented on within the report by the planning committee. I would, however, like to take a minute to clear up a couple of misunderstandings that have been raised within the letters of objection, if I may. One is regarding concern over security and negating the current benefit of a gated road. Well, I can confirm that neither pedestrian or vehicle access will be available from the Kettering Road through to Spring Gardens. There's a wall within my grounds already stopping that. And we also would divert the path, so there'd be no pedestrian access through my property either. So that's not going to happen. And there's also stated that there's disputes regarding my right of way over Spring Gardens. I'm not sure about that. And I think in the commentary that was just read out from one of the objectors that I've never provided any evidence, which is rather odd because my lawyer provided all the evidence showing the right of way to all of the residents of Spring Gardens some 9 months ago, and which they thanked me for, and they've never come back. So I presume they accepted that my right of way exists. For the avoidance of doubt, it does. It exists all the way from the rear of my property to the sort of the old Vic. And it was actually settled and agreed in December 1991, well before any of the properties actually existed behind me. So that's all I have to say. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain.
Thank you.
Pop back into the waiting room now.
Yeah, sure.
I'm watching in YouTube.
Okay.
Okay, councillors. So, Councillor Thurland.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't think we've ever seen one like this before, but I think, can I start by saying that this barn conversion that came to us in 2019, I'm not sure if it was delegated, but it was passed, and the information that came with the application form and the accompanying document said, the design and access statement actually said the resulting layout suits the logistical requirements of both the accommodation and access transport requirements of the dwelling. So it came off the Kettering Road. And it says in section 10, it says the existing entrance will be retained, parking will be available to both the main property and the converted barn and equate to no less than 2 vehicles per dwelling. But on the application form, actually, it says there were going to be 6 parking spaces, which went on to the new one. And the officer's report says there is no reason to believe that the shared access and parking arrangements would cause a nuisance given the size of the space and that
Sorry, Councillor, what's this got to do with the current application?
Well, because had this come to the barn conversion with that access, I don't think it would have been passed. So what we're saying is we passed it with the information. The officer said, yes, it was okay to park there. So we don't really know why that's come up now, because they were it was adequate parking and everything on this other application. And we're talking about the highways, actually, and also the parking, because I can't see where all those lines go, whether they're reversing or going forward, which I think is what the officer said on the report. So we don't know if they're reversing or going in frontwards. The first parking pictures on the application were for 4 cars. And that obviously wasn't going to work. So they changed it to 3 cars now in tandem. Now, I don't think that you can get 3 cars in and out on that small space. It's going to encumber onto the people in Spring Gardens. And what happens when there's visitors or delivery lorries, as they said? So under policy 8 of the JCS, it says that it shouldn't have any adverse effect on neighbouring properties. Well, I think it will do. And also highways actually recommend, so highways, you might say they didn't object, they actually recommend visibility displays as they can see a hazard, and should this have been on anything other than a private road, they would have insisted. And they say, owing to the proximity of the proposed access to the existing access of the neighbouring property and the concept of seeing and being seen, they advise they are considered. However, they can't insist. And the applicant has been asked to do that, and he said no. So surely as a planning authority, we have to go with safety recommendations, or we'll just be saying what price safety. So I think, again, this comes under JCS policy 8, undue disruption to the houses in Spring Gardens. I can't see what gates they're going to put on that opening either, because if they're opening gates, they're going to, the house, if you see on the left, those gates, when they swing open, are going to stop the access to the car of that house on the left. So again, that isn't good for the neighbours. And also we're talking about climate change principles. With the hard standing, we're getting rid of all that greenery. The hard standing is going to be there instead of grass to soak up the water. And the residents from that property are going to have to drive all the way around through Burton to get into the back way to Spring Gardens. So you might think it doesn't say much, but every little helps. So I think what we got to think about is, would we have passed that had it come with access? And under JCS of the policy 8, does it affect the amenity of the neighbouring people? And I think, yes, it does. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, any officers want to make a comment before we move on?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we just need to be clear that obviously we have to consider each application on its own merits. So what's gone before is obviously relevant, but this is a new application for the new access, and we have to consider it on those merits in itself. Just coming to some of the points, the vehicle manoeuvring that was shown shows that vehicles can do a 3-point turn within the site. The visibility, as is highlighted, obviously because it's on a private drive, the county council can't comment on it because it's outside their remit. They had some comments about the visibility. But officers having visited the site concluded that a 5th access point off that private drive and a central position off the end of that private drive wouldn't in itself be unsafe given the low speeds that would be associated with manoeuvring into that private drive. Gates, there's no mention of gates. Obviously, if the gates were opening within the site, they wouldn't potentially need planning permission. If they were opening outwards onto those neighbouring properties, clearly that would be a civil matter. Finally, the hard standing, because it's to the rear of the property, wouldn't in itself need planning permission. So they could tarmac the whole of that rear of their property without planning permission. It's because it's associated with the drive that it comes forward as part of this application.
Chair, can I just ask Richard? Yeah, highways have said they would ask for visibility. They do think it's a danger coming out of that entrance with those cars, but that's why they're asking for visibility displays, but they can't insist. You've asked, the officers have asked the applicant to put them in, and he won't. And so I think that if you're looking at safety, I think that's a big thing. Yes, they can't insist, but they have actually recommended them. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Councillor O'Hara.
Thanks, Chair. Just concur really with what Councillor Thurland said, but I do have concerns because we have a number of developments now that are being built with gated access, which gives people that assurance and that safety aspect. But in this area, it's also an area that does flood quite frequently in Burton, and to then lose soak away land, if you like, by getting rid of those trees. It's just going to increase the problem that they have down Spring Garden. It's a well-known walkway for residents in at night. I walk it frequently because it's a nice circuit to go up Church Street, etc. So, and a lot of people will walk through there to get to the town if they're going to Sainsbury's or something. So, you know, the fact that there's going to be more vehicles coming out into Spring Gardens, especially when the pub is open, is a real concern. And I do think that highways have kind of missed something here, because the visibility displays, had it been anywhere else, they would have insisted on it. Had it not been a private drive, it would have been a real cause for concern. And the fact that we've already got access, I don't understand why we now need another access through is a private estate to all intents and purposes. I know the applicant has said that he's had access, and that was it in 91 that it was allowed. But it does concern me that we are giving access and authority to build this other access when the applicant has got to go through what, as I say, a private estate. Surely, if we're looking at it and we're not sure of how they're going to be able to egress from the site, if we're thinking that they're going to have to reverse, that is a massive concern, especially when you've got children living in those homes. And more importantly, like I said, people walking. I know I keep saying it, in this COVID world, we need to future-proof things, and I don't think we are. I don't think we're really thinking that that this is a suitable state. Well, I don't think it's safe. I don't think that we are adhering to policy A to the JCS because of the visibility displays. And my big concern is the water flow in that area. We have got a higher water table because of all the developments we're having now. And I think that will disadvantage the residents in Spring Gardens. I think we'll see more flooding in that area, and that is a major concern as far as I'm concerned. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Richard, can you just confirm the where the trees and that are being cut down is? Can the applicant do that without planning permission? Is that what you said?
The trees?
Yeah.
No, so the hard standing, the applicant could do hard standing because it's to the rear of his property, so it'd be just the same as you and I do in a patio. It would come,
right. Okay, that's fine.
It would come to class F.
So you know, trees are a real hot topic at the moment, as I'm sure that the council are aware. And then that destruction of those trees is going to take away from the ambience of that area. And I think, as Councillor O'Hara said, you know, it does affect more flooding because those trees are obviously absorbing the water. And if they've gone, then that water still has to go somewhere else. So, you know, I really do think that should come into the aspect of the I know you say it's not in the conservation or just outside the conservation area, but it is surely part of the climate change principles.
Yeah, this site, to be clear, this site marks the boundary in the conservation area. So this site is in the conservation area. Spring Gardens, as in the 4 new houses, are outside the conservation area.
So the trees are in the conservation area?
They are, yes, yeah. So
which makes that even worse, Richard.
So if the applicant wanted to come forward, ignoring this application, if the applicant wanted to come forward with to remove those trees, they'd need a TCA application, a trees in conservation area application. But obviously, those works that fall within this permission would be covered by this permission if it was granted.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Titcombe.
Thank you, Chair. If my concern is over the tracking, sort of the parking. I'm considering like standard of driving that's spelt in this world these days, and I do query the fact the 3-point turns there looks more like probably a 6-point turn, but judging how people struggle to parallel park these days, of which you get plenty of experience if you live in a terrace street, that just does not look big enough to get cars in there safely. Now, I don't know if the rule of coming out nose first from your property applies in this case, being a private road, but I know it applies on the major roadways where you have to come out nose first, although they seem very reluctant to enforce that rule throughout the country, but nonetheless, it is there. So I'm very concerned at just that spot. That's my only problem with it, with the highways, but it is a private drive. So I don't know if anything can be done about that. Man had right of way through there. So said, I'm just concerned about that. But I certainly don't think that the parking is adequate there. I really don't. It's too small. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've got no more speakers, and so far everyone who's seemed to be objecting. So either I have a proposal. Oh, Councillor Howes.
Yes, sorry, Chair. It's just I'm a bit confused about something, and I probably have missed it. But I know it's not, the question is not particularly relevant to the application, other than why does the applicant need access in this capacity when he's already got access? I don't understand it. Can somebody explain why the applicant wants access through this cul-de-sac when he's already got access through his property?
It's not a planning consideration as far as I'm aware. So that's why it's not in the report. He's asked to do it. We're looking at, he wants to do it.
Yeah. The reasons why an applicant puts in an application is not a material consideration. What we have to do is just consider the planning policy and the material considerations that we can take into account.
Okay. Yeah, well, okay. Well, that leaves us to some guesswork in that respect. I appreciate it's not a planning material matter, but that does lead me to guess on certain other things. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Morton, you got your hand up?
You know, when I look at it, I've just looked at it on Google Earth, and you look at that space, it's very, very small. And, you know, the action of trying to park cars there, of which there's 4 shown in the diagram, I think, or 3. You know, I'm trying to understand what, you know, I could understand if it was a temporary access through a cul-de-sac just to do some building work on your land, but that is not how cars should be actually passed. And the fact that they could be reversing out, there could be children playing in that cul-de-sac. You know, from Google Earth, it just does not look correct why they're putting cars there. And you say, okay, you don't have there, but I'm thinking, why are we granting access when there appears to be perfectly good access in the front, and it would affect that cul-de-sac and potential children playing. And also I'm trying to figure out how drivers would actually get through the gated area if they haven't got past. So it's not really a total right of way for vehicles unless they live in the houses. So I really can't, my mind's just not working why we should grant something that appears to be of no meaning to me. So, you know, sorry.
Well, the officer's recommendation is approval. So do I hear a proposer for that and a seconder, or an alternative?
I'll propose an alternative to that, that was refused on highways grounds, and which is JCS, I'm not sure which one, but JCS policy 8 as well, for the effect that it's going to have on the neighbouring residents, and also the it doesn't fit with our climate change principles, where we're getting rid of trees and putting hard standing down and making people drive further. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that?
I will second that, Chair.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yep.
The loss of trees and climate change is a very tenuous thing to refuse something on.
Yeah, okay, Peter.
What I've heard is the issues about parking, the access is not adequate for visibility displays, and I suggest members, if they want to refuse it, they think about concentrate on that issue.
I think safety, reversing parking.
Sorry, George, one at a time, please.
I'm sorry, Chair. Shall I try? I would say that the access and egress of that is too small, and also the parking is ridiculously too small and it's unsafe. Certainly cannot reverse out there with any degree of safety. And as for turning, just not enough room there. Maybe Jackie Chan could do it with his high-speed car, but you need wet surface for that. That's the proposal on that anyway.
So can we stick with the highways then, Chair, and policy 8 for the effect that's going to have on the neighbouring properties? Thank you.
Okay, so that's been proposed and seconded. So Eden, if you want to go through the vote for me, please.
Thank you, Chair. Voting on the amendment to refuse, Councillor Thurland.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For the amendment.
Councillor Mitchell.
For the amendment.
Councillor Howells.
For the amendment.
Councillor O'Hara.
For the amendment, please.
Councillor Titcombe. Councillor Adams.
For.
And Councillor Morton.
For the amendment.
That is unanimous for the amendment, Chair.
So that was CAT 2020, probably 0659 is refused. Thank you. So on to 5.3, which is Forest Glade Kettering.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. The application before you here, 7 Forest Glade, KUT 2020-0746, is for a change of use of dwelling to a children's care home up to 3 children aged between the ages of 8 and 18. Have an update. I do apologise in advance. It is rather long. It is a statement from the applicant. I will pick out the relevant bits as I see it, that all the children are aged between 8 and 18 years old and have a long period of assessment before being placed in a home to safeguard the children and residents, and they're accompanied at all times 24/7. The staff act as competent parents by being consistent and offering appropriate structures and boundaries to help the children to accept and respect themselves and others. The internal plan, the downstairs toilet will be used by staff and the children will use the bathroom and ensuite facilities upstairs. The smallest bedroom, which is bedroom 5 on the plan, will be used as an office. 2 things from me. Condition 2 will need to be amended to include a revised plan, which came in on the 8th of February. And section 6, paragraph 4, states that there are 4 bedrooms. This is actually a typing error and there are 5 bedrooms. So if we can go ahead with the PowerPoint. So the site there in front of you, edged in red, just bring to your attention to the north of the site and to the east runs a series of interconnecting footways around the Brambleside estate. You can see to the west where that footpath connects to another one further north that leads over the motorway, I believe, or under, I'm not quite sure. And there's footways all around. And if you look at the very bottom of the site plan, on the southwest is the local primary school. Next slide, please. And this is the block plan showing the parking. So the hatched area in front of the property is parking for 2 cars. That's in front of a double garage. Next slide, please. This is the updated plan that came in on the 8th of February. The only alteration is where you can see where it did say bedroom 5, that's been crossed out to be an office for the management staff during the day. The reason why the office is upstairs rather than downstairs is that the home is akin to a family home where there isn't anything out of bounds for the children who are going to be living there. As you can see, there are 4 bedrooms, a master bedroom with an ensuite, bedroom 2 with an ensuite, and then 2 further bedrooms with a family bathroom. And then downstairs, kitchen, diner, living room, conservatory, and a downstairs loo. So if we go on to the photographs, So this is taken just to the sort of northeast of the property. Where I'm standing is the entrance to the footpath that runs through the woodlands off to the west. Next photo, please. This is a photograph of the front elevation of the property. There's no external alterations, no extensions, no changes to the appearance at all. Next slide, please. This one is taken from the northeast, looking down towards the property, which is at the bottom of the photograph. You can see the wooded area in front of the house and on the other side as well. So you can see that it's a very sort of wooded green area that's forms part and parcel of this estate. Next slide, please. Again, a similar photo. You can see the school right at the bottom of the road, the red brick building, and the application property is to the right-hand side of the screen on the photo. Next slide, please. I think there's one more. Again, so this one's taken just a little bit further down. The application property has disappeared from the screen, so you can just see the school in front of the of you at the bottom of the road. I'm not quite sure why this one was put on, but there it is. And the next slide, which is the last one, which is another view of the front of the property with Sovereign's Court to the left of the screen, which its cul-de-sac leads on to a close of mainly detached properties. So if I just bear with me 1 second. Okay. The property, so the change of use of the property from a single family unit to a residential care home is a residential use. A residential use in a residential area is acceptable in principle. So there's no conflict with any local or national planning policy. The change of the use of the building for a care home for up to 3 children between the ages of 8 and 18 years old, there'll be no material impact on the surrounding area by way of its external appearance, as there's no external alterations as proposed. So again, this is it accords with our policy 8 of the joint core strategy. With regard to impact on neighbouring residential amenity, the property is a sizable detached family dwelling with a large garden, and the premises would be occupied in its existing form with no extensions proposed for the ground floor rooms, and they will remain in use as living accommodation. The property is bounded by only one other property, and that's to the north on Sovereign Court. The garden is large, and officers have considered that any potential noise from the use of the garden would equate to a similar noise that a single family with 3 or 4 children may have. And we don't consider that would be excessive, that it would cause harm to neighbouring amenity. That brings me on to parking. There is sufficient parking for I'll just backtrack a little bit there. There will be 3 carers with the 3 children. It's one-to-one care during the day, and then depending on how many children will actually be living at the house, there'll be either 1 or 2 carers at night. So there will always be an adult there with them. The children will not go out unaccompanied. They will be accompanied by their carer at all times. So in regard to traffic movement, any visits that need to be undertaken to social workers, therapists and the like, that's all off premises. So the children will go and visit their social workers if they need to, or therapists or anybody else in that regard, away from the house on neutral ground. So there won't be excessive traffic movements from people coming to the house the only people that will be in the house are the children and the carers and the management at any one time. There have been several concerns raised about on-street parking and the intensification of use of this property, and which may bring intensification of parking. The 2 times that I've visited the site, there has been a car parked on the other side of the road. I don't believe that it's anything to do with this property. But I would say that with it being in such close proximity to the school, I would say that if there are issues with on-street parking, it's likely to be associated with drop-off and pick-up times with the school. Highways have no objections to the proposed use, and they haven't made any comments on the on-street parking. And 4 parking spaces is considered to be sufficient for the amount of people that will actually be using cars at the property. So in conclusion, before we have any questions, the application property is a large detached dwelling. There are 5 bedrooms. There's adequate internal space for the use of the property as a children's care home. And there are no sound planning reasons to refuse permission. It is in accordance with all of our relevant policies and with national guidance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Carol. If we could have our first speaker, Councillor Davies.
It's coming through now, Chair.
Evening, Councillor.
Good evening, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're ready when you are.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair and colleagues, for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm speaking on behalf of many residents who contacted me and more colleagues with their significant material concerns about this application. In addition to the 61 objectors noted in the officer report, it's vital that developments are located appropriately and ensure good cohesion between occupants and neighbours. It is the shared opinion of many that this development simply would not be appropriate for the proposed location. And there's very little detail contained in the officer report, which provides sufficient reassurance on how these key concerns could be overcome. I'll now cover these main material objections as follows that have been raised with me. Firstly, the impact on amenity of the neighbours. Residents are concerned that the application would present a significant impact on the amenity of those living in the area. Policy 8 of the Joint Core Strategy must avoid unacceptable impact, and after reading the officer report, the applicant has not submitted any real detail on how they would deliver a cohesive and harmonious development. There's no dispute that the applicants are a reputable company and clearly provide a valued service for young people, often from difficult backgrounds, in the right location. However, I've seen no detail in the officer report about how they would maintain the welfare and security of not only the occupants, but also that of neighbouring residents. For example, a detailed plan covering security and associated CCTV. Despite continued efforts by Councillor Bill Parker and myself, working with police colleagues, there is ongoing crime in the area, particularly associated with the secluded nature of the adjacent woods and county lines, drug dealing and associated behaviour. The applicant's own website mentions that they work with, and I quote, young people who are vulnerable to county lines and criminal exploitation. Concern about crime is not scaremongering, but a material and valid concern evidenced by various press reports of recent arrests in the area. A neighbour who has personal involvement as the landlord of similar facilities has reported knife incidents associated with these properties and has clear concerns of similar activity occurring in this location. And it's unclear how this can be reduced and overcome. A registered disabled gentleman who lives nearby finds loud noises difficult to comprehend, and this results in him getting distressed. These residents are therefore naturally concerned about the impact on their amenity from the proposed change of use and potential for increased noise. It's also worth noting that the applicant may not be the end user, as planning permission goes with the land. So any information submitted and containing the officer report cannot be considered a guarantee of the final operation should it get permission. I now turn to impact on the highway and parking. The Highways Authority have expressed that they weren't satisfied with the level of detail on the supplied parking plan, and it's unclear how this complies with parking standards for premises of this nature. The site, as mentioned, is very close to Brambleside Primary School. The narrow surrounding streets come under regular pressure, particularly at peak drop-off times, but during the day with deliveries and vans and what have you. And there is, again, insufficient detail presented about how many staff or visitors will be at the property at one time. Condition 4 only covers how many residents will be living on site, not how many carers or visitors or associated people. There's no precise detail in the report of the movement patterns of visitors and staff that provide sufficient reassurance to neighbours. The property is not near a bus route, which means that the car is the only way to really access the property. It is unclear who the cycle store will be there for, and again, there's insufficient detail present in the officer report from the applicant on a proposed transport plan. I do recognise the need for facilities providing a quality and compassionate environment for children in their care. However, these developments should be delivered appropriately and must have sufficient detail to reassure and resolve the clear concerns of neighbours. This is not in place for this application. We also have similar precedent on a recent application in Rothwell, which was similarly refused for similar reasons. Concerns and local knowledge of the area's residents should be respected, and I politely request that you take into account their considerable material concerns, as I've just outlined, when you make your final decision this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Callum will now put you, Callum will put you in the waiting room, and we'll have our next speaker. Good evening, can you hear us? Ada? Ada, can you hear us? She hasn't turned the microphone on. Callum, can you put her back into the waiting room and bring her back in?
Yeah, I was just about to do that, not a problem.
Ada, I don't know whether you can hear us. Hello, Ada?
Callum, do you want to send a message?
Yeah, I've just done to her, just see if she'll respond.
Okay.
No.
No, I'm not getting any response, Chair.
Chair, can Callum put her back in the waiting room and talk to her in the waiting room or not? And,
by chat.
Yeah, oh right.
Ada, can you hear us? Last time. Emma, can I have a bit of advice on what we do if we can't get the speaker in?
She didn't leave a script or anything, Callum, did she? No. So
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay. Is she an objector or the applicant?
The applicant.
Agent, yeah.
It's the agent, okay.
She did send me an email this morning. I'll just check to see what it said on it. If you just bear with me.
It looks as if she's got somebody there trying to help her as well.
Chair, sorry, can we put a sign up saying Eleanor wants to do, as she seems to be able to see us on screen?
Well, not anymore.
She's coming back. Oh, this might work.
Might just do it, yeah.
She's on twice now. Both without both without microphone. Oh, this looks better. There we go. Ada, can you hear us now? You're muted. You need to unmute yourself in the bottom left-hand corner if you're using a computer. There we go.
Got it.
So, welcome. When you've got 3 minutes to read your statement.
Okay. I would firstly like to reiterate the comprehensive.
If you've got YouTube on, can you silence it because it's going to confuse you?
Right, sorry about that. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Right. I would firstly like to reiterate the comprehensive assessment made by the planning officer in her report. The applicants very successfully operate over 40 children's homes throughout the UK and have received no complaints from residents or the Care Quality Commission about how these homes are operated. All of the children are aged between 8 and 18. Some might have autism and say some may be placed there for their own safety. They have a long period of assessment before being placed in the home and safeguard the children and local residents. They are accompanied at all times and the staff operate as competent parents, providing disciplined boundaries and reinforcing a safe family environment for them to learn life skills. The application is for a change of use of the residential dwelling to a small care home for 3 children, which is not a multi-purpose use, as someone previously pointed out. The principle of such use is acceptable in a residential area, especially as it will be close and convenient to the local school. This cannot be classed as overdevelopment of the property, as it already has 5 bedrooms and no extension or alterations are being proposed. In terms of parking and traffic safety, Highways have made no objections. In relation to noise and any disturbance generated from the proposal, this will be no greater than the normal use of a 5-bedroom property. In fact, it is likely to result in a lesser impact on residential amenities. In relation to the existing antisocial behaviour in the area and county lines issue, this application cannot be used to overcome existing issues and is stated above that the children are accompanied at all times. The applicants always work closely with the local police so that they are aware of issues and local troublemakers. The proposal will secure the long-term residential use for the family home, providing a family environment for these children. It will also offer local employment opportunities whilst enhancing the vitality of the local economy. It will provide much needed specialised care for children in a sustainable location and enable them to become valued members of society whilst contributing to meeting the council's specialist housing needs. In reality, there is no material change of use of property, as to all intents and purposes it will remain residential. Furthermore, the proposal meets the relevant local plan policies and the requirements of the NPPF. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ada. We'll put you into the waiting room. You can carry on watching on YouTube.
Thanks.
So, councillors, I've got no hands up at the moment. Oh, Councillor Thurland, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chair, David had got his hand up before me.
I'm not seeing any blue hands.
No, he's put his hand up.
All
Look.
right.
Do you want to do him first? I don't want to jump the queue.
Okay, Councillor Howes, but can you use the blue hand from moving forward so I can see what's going on?
Yeah, I'll try and get the right colour hand up next time. Would it be possible for the officer to bring up the slide of the front of the property, please? Is that possible for us to do that again, Just so we've got context. Yeah, can you go to the next couple of slides? There was another picture. That's the one. Could somebody explain to me, as per the highways comments, where 6 cars are going to park? Where's 6? Because as we can see in that one there, as there's no changes to the property, we've got a lovely BMW parked in the front of the one of the garages. As far as I can see, we'll probably get another car on there. Where's the other 3 or 4 going to go?
Chair, if I may, can I just point out that there is only 4 parking spaces. The applicant did state originally on the application form that there was 6, but that has been changed to 4.
Okay, thank you.
And that's 2 at the front and 2 in the double garage. If that's enough information.
So just so I've got this clear, every day there's going to be 4 members of staff turning up with 4 cars, 2 of which are going to garage them, and then when they wish to leave, the 2 in front are going to move their cars. I think you can see where I'm going with this. Whether it's 4, 5 or 6, this property does not have the ability for that level of car parking. Thank you, Chair. Okay, Councillor Thurland.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think my concern again is the quality of life for the children, and also this was built as a 5-bedroom home, not a business, which is what it's going to be. And as Councillor Davis said, the application runs with the land, so thereby there can be many things going without further planning approval. Talking about the ratio, 3 children with needs, that mean a ratio of 1 to 1 or even higher, because it says up to 3, but ratio between 3 or 4, therefore it could be deemed to be higher. And if that ratio is required during the day, surely if they're all 18-year-olds, they're going to need more than those at night, because if one or a little one decides to go out, or an older one decides to go out. Did you mute me?
Sorry, accidentally.
What I was going to say is the ratio, we've got 1 to 1, but they're saying they need 1 to 1 during the day or more, because it says 3 or 4 for the 3 children, and only 2 at night. Well, if you've got youngsters in the house and you've got older ones who abscond, you're going to need more people, because people need to stay behind to look after those younger ones. And it says, page 43, the applicant says the children and residents are accompanied at all times, but that's not what the ratios say. And also it's my concerns about the size of the dwelling to be able to provide enough space for running a business and providing quiet space and outbreak rooms. And I think the fact that they've just crossed out bedroom to put an office up there, I really think is that to just placate what we're going to say about how much room there is. And also page 46 talks about no more than 6 residents living together as a single household, but this is more than 6 with the carers and staff, because they must have other staff as well as carers to do the other work. It also talks about specialised housing needs within the borough. I've never heard that we've got any numbers on that. Policy JCS 8 has been discussed before. But my real concern are the facilities for these children and for the staff. Now, the staff are going to use the toilet downstairs, so the other children have got to run up and downstairs to go to use the other toilet, which I don't think is going to happen. And also the concerns about the age group. If you're mixing 8-year-olds with special needs with 18-year-olds with special needs, that lends itself to needing even more space, because the different needs are huge between an 8 and an 18-year-old. And these children, they need to live everyday lives, not just bundled from one room to another. Their care journey starts here with us, and it's up to us to make sure it starts with the best of that we can offer them, not sharing it as a business, because it's not. This is supposed to be their homes. And talking about the changeover times, it is going to be noisy there. It is going to affect the neighbours. And if we're talking about 3 carers and staff, what about the 18-year-olds that are going to live there? If there was 3 18-year-olds and they drive, that's going to be another 3 cars there, because we can't guarantee what ages. But my concern is really for the space for we need, you know, for these children, and are they going to get the best of that with 8 and 18-year-olds with no room apart from the bedroom to go? Thanks, Chair.
Carol, did you want to come back on any of that?
Yeah, so if I can just, from experience of dealing with these over a long period of time, and I'm sure that Ms McManus would agree with me if she was still on screen, the way these care homes work is that they group the children together in ages. So you wouldn't necessarily have an 8-year-old, a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old living there. They're placed in clusters, so they would be more age related. So you may have 8, 9 and 10-year-olds, or you may have 16, 17 or 18-year-olds. You wouldn't have that massive age group between them. Now, I can't say 100% that's how they run, because obviously that's a management issue, but from experience of dealing with these applications an awful lot, this is usually the case. So you know, I'd like to think that, and again, when you said if an 18-year-old wants to go out at night, they are accompanied all the time. They're not allowed to go out on their own, you know. So if there is 2 carers there at night and there are 3 children, it's a safe environment. If one of them did abscond, you know, and again, these things happen, don't they? You would still have, excuse me, a carer at the house. And I'm sure there is emergency codes within their management plan that if somebody did leave, that there would be emergency cover coming in pretty much straight away. Again, with the internal space, it's if there wasn't sufficient internal space for that company, it's unlikely that they would have bought that house. And again, it's not for us to actually dictate what size is adequate, because that's something that they've obviously decided prior to even putting in this application. If it wasn't sufficient for their needs, I don't think we'd be sitting here looking at such an application. And again, in regards to parking and for other people coming in and out, I did explain through the report, through the presentation, is that there are, apart from the staff, there's no other third parties coming into the property. So there's not going to be that turnover of cars, because the social workers come for an hour and then a therapist is coming for another hour. So all those things are taken away from the property and are dealt with in other buildings or neutral ground. So I think I've covered both Councillor Thurland and Councillor Howes there. But if not, please, yeah, come back to me.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
Thanks, Chair. I have a few concerns, really. Very similar to what Councillor Thurland has already said, and I agree with all that she said. But the concern I have is that I did used to work with young people, and I've worked with young people from a variety of backgrounds, and indeed some who went into such homes as these. And the problem that we did have was that we.
Sorry, Councillor, can you speak up a bit? I'm finding it hard to hear you.
Sorry, the problem that I think may arise is the concerns with children perhaps loitering that they make friends with, and the proximity to the woodland. There are problems within the area in terms of well, as we've already said, county lines and things like that, that these children can be utilised for or drawn into. The other problem is that given the ages of the children, what school would they be accessing, and then the transport that they'd be using to be able to get to school? Would the care workers then take them to the school in individual cars, or is there going to be a minibus organised for them? Which would have an impact on the amenity of those people living in that area. So I think you would see an increase in traffic to the site. You've got big double garages, and as Councillor House says, I do not believe that they would ever be used to park cars on, therefore they would be parking on the street in a very enclosed area. So there is that problem that does arise again with Policy 8. And it's a very, very narrow area, and surrounding streets are narrow, as Councillor Davies has already said. My concern is as well is we've got a 5-bedroom house, one that now says it's going to be used as an office. There's going to be 3 children living there. There's only 2 rooms downstairs. You've got your kitchen and your lounge area. There isn't particularly a breakout room. Again, we need to be looking at the care for the children. Those children need that space sometimes. If they have a meltdown, they need somewhere they can go. So is the 4th bedroom going to be used as a bedroom for the carers to sleep of a night time? If there's going to be 2 of them there, how are they going to do that if there's only 1 bedroom? They shouldn't be sleeping because obviously they're there for the children, but I know carers do. So what is the, I know that's not part of the planning remit, but it's something that to consider for the care of those children. And on the whole, it's just not in the right place for children if they're 18 or 18. It's close to a school. And I just don't think it meets the remit that children nowadays actually need. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Titcombe.
And we're there at last. Right, most of it's been said. I will go for Policy 8. Seems to come up quite a lot. The NJCS requires that development protects amenity by not resorting unacceptable impact on the amenities of future occupiers, stroke neighbouring properties or the wider area by reason of noise, vibration, smell, light, or other pollution. It's evident here that we've had 61 letters received. I presume they're from the immediate neighbours around there. Councillor Davies is quite rightly representing them. I do ask to bear in mind that we are councillors, and our first priority is to concerns of constituents. There is problems in that area with the wooded area. I know it quite well. I used to walk the dog around there. And we borrow the neighbours sometimes and walk around with their dogs. It just does not seem right for the area there. It's unfortunate. It's where it is, but any other place other than just there, I think would have been okay. But I just can't seem to get a good grip on this and say yes, it's okay. But I don't think it is. And that's what I have to say, Chair. Thank you.
James, did you want to come in then? I saw your hand go up.
Well, Chair, I think this is similar to the application that you previously assessed last time you met, and you know, to a degree, we can't second guess the management considerations of the companies that are coming in and delivering these services and providing this change of use. You know, it is for 3 children. Officers have assessed it in relation to the space, you know, required in relation to parking and traffic movements. You could have a very large family that would provide exactly the same sort of impact. So officers don't think that Policy 8 is, you know, a valid consideration in terms of refusing on those grounds. And I've just got to ask, you know, if it's not here, then where could these kind of facilities go? So, you know, we've kind of put out that a clear recommendation for approval in this respect, and members have to come up with you know, good valid reasons for refusal if that's what they wish to do. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair.
Actually, James has just sort of said some of the things I was going to say. This is a very large family home that could easily house a couple with 4 adult children. So I'm thinking that just as a normal family home, we could be looking at 6 to 8 cars attached to that property, which would need no planning permission whatsoever. Again, like last time, I did say these homes, etc., can't just open up with no regulation. They are heavily regulated and have to meet requirements of space, facilities, etc. So I would just really like to put to the committee that I'm in favour of this. I think it's in a good area. There's a lot of nice space around there. So it's good visually, it's good for walking in, for them to be able to, you know, for people to be able to go out and walk around that area. And again, I don't think we can hold the problems that are already there against this particular planning application. So it's just my thought.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little bit undecided. I think one of the reasons I'm undecided is the safety of the children there. I mean, if you get 16, 17-year-olds, they're going to be out of the house at night. If they've been there all day or whatever, and the fact that you're telling me there's drug dealing in the area, county lines, crime, you know, and it's a very wooded area whereby children could, you know, venture into that area for excitement. Unfortunately, I'm a bit worried about finding the wrong sort of excitement, and they are very vulnerable children that are probably going to be open to almost indoctrination by their peers that they meet up with, because they will be desperate to meet up with friends in that area. And I'm not clearly understanding, you know, when people are saying there's drug, you know, there's drug dealing, there's possible syringes on the floor. And also the fact that I'm being told there's 61 objections, which basically says people, you know, should have some say in their local area these days. And it's pushing me the way to think, you know, against. And that's all I can say, unless somebody can clear my mind on that, on those safety reasons, really.
Does anyone want to come back on any of that or carry on? No? Okay. Councillor Thurland.
Yeah, I've just got one thing. We were talking about the amenity and policy 8, and I think last time we talked about the effect of the changeover and things like that on the neighbouring residents. But just going back to the school business, because I've lived, ever since I've been up here, lived opposite a school for children with special needs, and they always get one person in a taxi. So are we saying then that if there's 4 young children and they've all got to be accompanied, they're all going to go in a taxi, there'll be nobody left there if they don't have one-to-one. There'll be nobody there looking after the house, if you like. And I know you can say that about parents, but that is going to have a big impact on that area. But my thought is that yes, you can use policy 8, because that you can say yes, what James quite rightly said, the officers think it's okay, but obviously the neighbouring people don't, and that changeover with the schools and the taxis, etc., is going to have a huge impact on that little narrow road, with taxis coming in and out and not being able to go up onto the drive because the 2 cars will be there with the other 2 in the garage. So I think that is a big issue. Thank you.
Councillor Titcombe, is it something new?
Just about. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Thurland and myself, we happen to have the ward next door to it. You could say that Brambleside is their back door. We're very well aware of this area. this house, although it's a family house, as has been said before, but we do have a problem out there, which we haven't got on top of yet. And we're putting vulnerable young adults, young children there in a house who will no doubt go out for a walk and get in there. As I said earlier in my statement, anywhere else, this would be okay, but this is not the appropriate area. It just is not right sitting there. It's too close to an area which has not been brought under control yet. Thank you, Chair. That's all I have to say.
James, I think you're going to say what I was just going to say, and then I'll go to Carol.
Okay, so my last comment, I think, is that, you know, that this is a residential use. You know, there are other residential uses which are permitted by PD rights, such as an HMO. So this could change into a up to six bedroomed HMO without planning consent. So members just need to bear, you know, that in mind in relation to, you know, what could come in place of this residential family home. And it's not for the planning system and planning applications to sort out the issues of other, you know, regulatory regimes. You know, we can only deal with planning matters. Thank you.
Carol, did you want to come back?
I was just about to say really the same as James, but also just to touch on that. Yes, I understand from local residents that, and from councillors tonight as well, that there are problems within the area with the county lines and some drug issues and that. But these are problems that already exist, and they're not planning matters; they're police matters. Northamptonshire Police have been consulted on this application. They've been given a lot of information, and they came back with no comments to make. So I really feel that when members are making their decisions tonight, that they cannot use the existing drug problem or antisocial behaviour problems as a reason for wanting to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can I also correct something Councillor Thurland said? There's 3 children, not 4. So it's, and as Councillor Adams said, currently it's a 5-bedroom house, so there could be 4 17-year-old pluses and their parents living there as well. So no more speakers. So the recommendation is approval. Do I have a proposer and a seconder for that? So Councillor Adams proposed, Councillor Mitchell seconding. Eden, do you want to do the vote?
Thank you, Chair. So a vote on the proposal to approve. Councillor Thurland.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Howells.
Against.
Councillor O'Hara.
Against.
Councillor Titcombe.
Abstain.
Councillor Adams.
For.
And Councillor Morton.
Abstain, I think.
Okay, that's 2 abstentions, 2 for and 4 against.
Okay, so you voted against the recommendation. So do I have a proposal for an amendment?
Oh, sorry, Chair. Yeah, policy 8 for the impact on the residents, which we've had. And yeah, I can understand some are saying, no, that's wrong. Some are saying, but it is our residents' choice to have somebody.
Sorry, Councillor, it's got to be a planning consideration.
It is policy 8 on the effect on the local amenity is a policy. It is a planning consideration.
Chair, may we also have highway consideration as well? Access.
I can't hear you, Councillor.
Sorry, Chair, can we also have highway as a consideration for access?
You mean parking?
Sorry, yes, sorry, Chair.
So you're saying for policy 8 for amenities, effects of amenities on the neighbouring residents and parking. Is that right?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, can I just clarify exactly what the residential amenity impacts are? Are they?
The noise, the changeover with the cars, the traffic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that's proposed by Councillor Thurland. Councillor O'Hara, were you seconding that?
Yes, yes, Chair, please.
Okay. Eden, can you do a vote, please?
Certainly, Chair. So this is the vote on the amendment to refuse. Councillor Thurland.
Sorry, for Ethan, sorry.
Councillor Edwards.
For the amendment.
Councillor Mitchell.
Against.
Councillor Howells. Councillor O'Hara.
Amendment, please.
Councillor Titcombe.
Abstain.
Councillor Adams.
Against.
And Councillor Morton.
Abstain.
So that is 4 fours, 2 against, and 2 abstentions, Chair.
So that application is refused. Right. Okay. On to 5.1. The Old Willows in Broughton. Is that you, James?
It is, Chair. Thank you. I do have to apologise. I've been kind of flipping in and out, and my link with the internet is very dubious tonight. So if I fall out, maybe Peter can pick up where I've
Yeah,
left
I can
off.
pick up if need be.
Thank you, Peter. So this is an application 2020-0318, and it's for the extension of the Old Willows Gypsy and Traveller site. Next slide, please. So this is red line application plan, which has been submitted as part of the application, showing the main area of the application area and then the access road up to Northampton Road. Next slide, please. This is another better slide of it, showing the area basically, which is bordered by, to the north is the old A43 Gypsy and Traveller site, where I think there's 13 pitches, and then open countryside to the east and to the south, and then it's bounded to the west by the A43. Next application, next slide, please. So this is the detailed kind of block plan which was submitted with the application. It includes, the red line includes the existing 8 pitches plus 2 touring caravans, which have already been consented back in 2017. And so officers consider that this application, because it's for 12 caravans in total, is for 4 additional static caravans, and so there may well be other touring caravans which would be accompanied as well. But the actual layout plan is fairly poor in relation to showing the relationship of where the pitches are and how they'd be laid out and so on and so forth. So, you know, that information has not been forthcoming in relation to you know, the application as a whole. So it's been quite difficult to understand how that would come forward. Next slide, please. And this is information in relation to the retaining wall, which we'll come on to. Some of the site which has been which is within the red line has been sort of excavated. So some of the embankment to the A43 has been excavated, and they've put hardcore down in relation to the area that is part of the extension, and there is a requirement to provide a retaining wall, but we'll talk about that later in the application assessment. So if you go back to the red line area, the second red line area, that we'll just leave it on that. Thank you. So basically the application proposal is for 12 caravans, which I've stated, which increases it by 4. It should be noted that previously in the planning history, 2016 application, Kettering 2016-0847, this was for a site for 10 caravans, which was refused in relation to you know, it being overdevelopment. I mean, that was on a smaller site area, given that there is a small extension that's been provided. So in terms of the application, there's been a number of objections and representations made. The Local Highways Authority have commented that this retaining wall is required, and they've suggested that they would provide a specification of what was required and provide that for the applicant. However, that's not been forthcoming, and given the length of time that this application has been submitted, officers have decided that this should come forward without that information, as there are other material considerations which suggest its refusal. But that lack of information is a concern. Landscape and ecology, we've had comments on this in relation to adverse visual amenity impacts and loss of biodiversity and green infrastructure. There's been representation by ORS, the authors of the GTAA, and consultants for the council in relation to the nature of the current inhabitants and tenants of the Old Willows, that potentially most of these are not defined gypsy and travellers. And then Broughton Parish Council have made a long representation with a range of objections, including identified need, diversity of the site, harm to the environment, inadequate infrastructure and management, sanitary amenity, household waste, sewage disposal, and vehicle parking. And then finally, there have been further objections from 8 third-party respondees. So going on to the planning assessment and considerations, planning officers have looked at the principle of development, and in principle, gypsy and traveller sites, would be considered in principle acceptable in the open countryside where they meet various policy criteria. So the main policy criteria for the joint core strategy is policy 31, that covers gypsy and travellers issues. And then policy 7 of the Kettering Local Plan, Safe Policy, and RA5 are also relevant. So, we also have to assess these applications in relation to national planning policy for traveller sites. And as I've said, in principle, it's acceptable. But what we'll have to do is to assess the criteria of the proposals in detail against detailed policy of the development plan and the PPTS, and then see if this is acceptable in the overall balance and in relation to any other material considerations. So in relation to policy 31, first off, officers are not convinced that the proposals are actually for a gypsy and traveller site because of the existing current makeup of the tenants, and we've got some evidence to suggest that these have been sort of advertised on the internet in terms of being rented to non-gypsy and traveller defined occupants. However, if we were to assess the application and the proposals against the criteria of policy 31, then all of those criteria have to be satisfied. And officers have considered these, and that's in the report. And while some of those have been met, overall, the proposals do not meet these requirements in full, specifically in relation to residential amenity, to parking and turning of vehicles, and the layout and the impact of landscape. So therefore, all of these being critical issues that policy 31 has not been met. So then moving on to the 5-year supply of sites. If the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of sites, then this becomes a significant material consideration when considering the grant of planning permission for pitches or giving temporary consents. However, in this situation, officers have set out the current position in relation to the 2019 GTAA, which is the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment. And this also sets out the 5-year supply requirement. And officers are confident that there is a 5-year supply and that sufficient, pitches are available. So the requirement of additional pitches at this stage is not necessary. And moving on to ecology, officers' assessment based on the professional advice provided by Place Services, who advise the Joint Planning Unit, but also constituent parts of the North Northamptonshire area, have indicated that the proposals would cause a loss of green infrastructure and habitat fragmentation, creating a net loss of biodiversity. So this would be contrary to policy for the JCS, and therefore is also a material consideration to take into account. And moving on to the intentional unauthorised development within the report. So a ministerial statement in 2015 means that this is now a material consideration, and officers have considered that the excavation of the A43 embankment, so the area that I've said to the west of the red line area, to increase the area of this extended part of the Old Willows, and also the nature of the way the intentional unauthorised development came forward weighs heavily against planning permission being granted. So literally a planning application was submitted, after this works were undertaken. And then, the local planning authority, has a duty in relation to personal circumstances, human rights, and the best interests of the child. So we have a duty to take these matters into account in relation to Gypsy and Traveller planning applications, and where there are planning applications with people who have, I forget the terminology, but it's restricted. I'll come back to that. But in the light of the issues on human rights and the best interests of the child, clearly these have to be weighed up in the planning balance. With this application, however, there's been very little evidence that's been provided by the applicant. So it's been very difficult to weigh this and to judge that in relation to the other elements and the impacts of the proposals. And even if this were the case, and we had that evidence, it's unlikely that even significant personal circumstances in this case would be unlikely to outweigh the planning harm that had been set out in the report. So overall, officers are recommending refusal, and those reasons for refusal are set out at the beginning of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. I've got no speakers. No councillor. Oh, Councillor Titcombe.
Thank you, Chair. James has answered most of my questions there, which is basically come up across page 29. What is going to happen, because it is clearly it's caused some ecological harm, which is contrary to the policy. Works have already been done there. I mean, 12 is way too many for this site. I remember the original site. I sat on the panel then years ago, and also seeing how the blockhouse, best way of describing it, was vandalised over a period of time. I no longer look at it because I don't go to work that way anymore. But I presume it's obscured by what's left of the hedging. And that's about it, really. And there's too many there. It's in the wrong place, and I certainly not happy with the damage that's been done. I mean, will anything be done to correct this? Is one of the questions. Or do we just leave it and walk away? Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I think in relation to the requirements, I think even without the development of the extension to the Gypsy and Travellers site, the County Council as landowners to the embankment of the A43 need to come to some arrangement with the proposers to provide this retaining wall. So my understanding is that that has to go ahead in any event. But I suppose, if members follow the recommendation to refuse, then, we will undertake with the County Council whatever remediating activity is required on the site.
Thank you, James. Councillor Thurland.
Thank you, James. You always give a good report on these and these topics, and I think they're very thorough. There's a lot of conditions that, as you've said before, haven't been met or they're ambiguous or whatever, but your concern about the health and safety is what makes me think it's not a good idea. It's got to be considered by any planning authority to ensure that everyone has got a safe place to live. And there's going to be children living on this site, I would imagine, and they're the ones that we need to be safeguarding to make sure that they've got a good, safe and a reasonable place to live. So well done on that. Thank you.
Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just very quickly, just echoing that, James. Great report. I know this site very well. Historically, talked about the space between the caravans, haven't we, in the past? You know, it's really tight. Even with the current application that's been granted previously, extending it it's almost impossible. So I don't think we should be doing it for the benefit of the residents that are on the site.
Thank you. Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think the report sums up just about all the points, the reason for refusal. You know, looking for all the possibilities. I also think that the Brownston Parish Council, who obviously are the local people there and represent the local people, clearly gave a comprehensive view on the reasons for refusal. And I think, you know, looking at the whole report, I think basically it's self-explanatory and tells us what to do as a council, you know, taking into account all the points made, which is what we vote on based on what we read and conversations.
Thank you. Got no more councillors requesting to speak. You all seem as though you're happy with the recommendation. So the recommendation is refusal. Do I have a proposer and a seconder?
I'll propose it, Chair.
And second by Councillor Titcombe. So Eden, if you could do the vote.
Thank you, Chair. So vote on the recommendation for refusal. Councillor Thurland.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Howes.
For.
Councillor O'Hara.
For.
Councillor Titcombe. Councillor Adams.
For.
And Councillor Morton.
For the officer's recommendation.
That's unanimous, Chair.
So that application is refused. Before we crack on with the next one, we're at 7:45. Are you happy that we carry on beyond 8 o'clock to finish the last two if we need it? Okay. So on to item 5.4, which is 46 Polwell Lane, Barton Seagrave. Richard, I believe that's you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no update on this item, just to clarify. Yes, this is an application for demolition of the existing two-storey dwelling and the erection of a new two-storey dwelling on the site. So this is location plan, the plot located to the southwest of Polwell Lane. There to the west of the site, you can see the Barton Seagrave Community Hall, and to the west of that, the Red Row development. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed dwelling on the site, a two-storey dwelling. You can see that it's a sizable dwelling. But it has been reduced in size from the previous application, which was submitted a few months ago and was withdrawn following officers' concerns about its design and particularly its size. So this is the application before us, 2 stories. There you look at the top of the picture, you've got the block plan. You've got a staggered sort of roof line, so those 2 sort of grey areas to the west of the property are single storey elements. To the south of the property, I should highlight that there's the existing footpath which links Polwell Lane with the community centre, so a well-used pedestrian route there. And to north of the property there, you'll see number 44, who's one of the objectors to the scheme. And that's why it's been presented to committee. We have a letter of support from the parish council and 2 letters of objection. Next slide, please. So this has just been just for your own reference. So this was the previous scheme. If you look at the diagram at the top left, you can see the original scheme that was withdrawn following officers' concerns a few months ago was slightly grander, a little higher, but also had these sort of more Georgian design, but it had these dormers in particular, which are not sort of characteristic of that area. Next slide, please. So this is the floor plan of the proposed dwelling. You'll notice to the right-hand side of the first floor plan, you've got the bathroom and the ensuite. So that's two side-facing windows facing north towards number 44. They would be obscure glazed and non-opening below 1.7 metres to prevent any overlook into the neighbouring property. And likewise, there's an ensuite on the left-hand side of that first floor plan, which again looks south across that footpath towards the property at number 44 Polwell Lane. On the ground floor plan, we have two side-facing window, again on the right-hand side of the plan facing north, which serves a utility, and then a sort of rear door serving the lobby. And I'll touch on those in a moment. Next slide, please. So this is the existing property itself, as is covered in the report. It's a property of some age. It's been extended over the years and sits slightly forward of the sort of established building line in that part of Polwell Lane. There's the access to the right-hand side of the property there behind that black car. And then to the right-hand side of that, you've got the neighbouring property at number 44. And I'll touch on that in a bit more detail in a moment. Next slide, please. So that's again looking from slightly further up Polwell Lane, looking more sort of southwest towards the application site there on the sort of left of the photograph. Next slide, please. And again, this is from slightly south looking more sort of northwest towards the site. Next slide, please. So this is the neighbouring property at number 44. It's important to note, I'll touch on in a moment, there's one of the concerns from that neighbour is the proximity of this proposal to that neighbour. I'd just like on this slide to note the sort of the southern elevation of that building. So that's the elevation of the property just above that garage roof that's sort of bathed in sunlight there. Because below that there's a breakfast room window which looks across towards the site that I'll pick out again in a moment. Next slide, please. And this is number 48. And then to the right, you can see that footpath between number 48 and the application site itself. Next slide, please. This is the existing access to the site, which will be widened. You'll probably see from the planning report that as part of the concerns about the previous scheme, and the reason part of the reason it was withdrawn was because of concerns about the parking provision on sites. The house itself has been moved back further in the plot, and the proposed access widened to allow sufficient parking space off the highway. Next slide, please. And this is the well-used footpath that links Polwell Lane to the Red Road development to the rear and the Barton Seagrave Community Centre. And on this sort of elevation, this southern end of the site, there's been improvement made from that previous scheme where they've got a more sort of staggered roofscape, which is a bit less bulky from this sort of public vantage point. Next slide, please. So this is looking at the rear of the plot. This is looking across towards, that's the application site on the right there, and looking across to the left behind the telegraph pole towards number 44. Next slide, please. And here, behind the blue arrow, is the approximate position of the breakfast room window, which sits in a small courtyard. Behind that, the garage on the right-hand side, and sort of in the courtyard adjacent to that building on the left, which is a former garage, which is now a utility room to the right-hand side and a sunroof facing west toward the rest of that garden. Next slide, please. And that's looking from the application site, looking across the public footpath towards that number 48 Polwell Lane. Next slide, please. And this is looking from the site towards the rear, towards the community centre. Next slide, please. And looking from the community centre car park itself back in towards the site. So the site's behind those trees in sort of middle of that photograph. Next slide, please. So this is an important picture. So this is that area that I highlighted on that photograph with the arrow. So here we're looking from the neighbouring site across back towards the application site. So you've got that garage to the left there, as you look out at this photograph. To the right is that former garage, which now houses a utility room and the sunroom. And we're stood in the breakfast room of that property, looking across towards the site. And you'll see in the report, there's concerns about the sort of proximity. There's a distance from this window to the boundary of 3.5 metres, because it's essentially the width, as I showed you on that first earlier photograph, it's the width of that existing single garage at that site. And then this new dwelling on the application site is set 2.5 metres from the boundary. So distance from this window across towards the elevation of the new building is a distance of 6 metres, as is covered in the officer report. Next slide, please. So the neighbours raised a number of concerns. One of them around the loss of light and the impact on their sort of private amenity space. And you'll see the patio doors to the right-hand side of that image. There's a small sort of patio area which is nearest to the site, but as is covered in the report, due to the sort of staggered rear of the proposed site with the single-storey extension in the closest proximity to that part of that neighbouring property and the orientation of the site, it's not considered that there'll be an acceptable amenity impact for that neighbour by reason of loss of light or overbearing impacts. Next slide, please. That's again just looking at that sunroom. Next slide, please. Could you just go back to the elevation, please? So, yeah, as I mentioned, it's reported to committee because we've got a letter of support from the parish council and the letter of objection from the neighbour and another from a Barton Seagrave resident. The scheme is about 0.6 or 6 centimetres lower than the previous scheme. And the applicant has worked with the officers to try and address some of the concerns, as I mentioned, about the parking and the design in the previous submission. And given the sort of more staggered design of this proposal, the lack of the sort of 2.5-storey element, then we can consider this is, while a substantial property, is more in keeping with the size of the plot and with the surrounding mixed character of development in that side of Polwell Lane. Concerns, particularly from that next door neighbour, have been raised about the use of the roof space and loft conversions and those sorts of things. So you'll see that there's a condition removing any permitted development rights for openings in those side elevations, and also any openings in that roof space itself. So hopefully that will give the members some comfort about that particular element, that should they seek to do any of those conversions, they would need to come before us as the local planning authority. As of the site, as you probably well imagine, it's a generous property, so it clearly meets national space standards. I've covered that 6 metre distance, which is shown at the top of that diagram there, between the north elevation of this building and the breakfast room window of that number 44. Highways have no objections to the scheme. That parking area is considered sufficient. There's sufficient width in the access to provide safe access out onto Polwell Lane. The footpath to the south of the site is unimpeded by this development, and therefore, as set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval subject to those conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. So I've got a written statement from the applicant, Mr. Sergio Rosella, which I'll now read out. My name is Sergio Rosella, and with my wife, I am the co-owner of 46 Polwell Lane, Barton Seagrave. I've recently purchased this property and made my planning application to create a new family home for me and my family to live in. My first application was withdrawn following my agent's discussions with, and subsequently with my discussions with planning officers. It was redesigned and represented in the current form. I am certain that I have listened, taken on board and included several changes within my reapplication in order to accommodate the planning officer's suggestions, including repositioning the proposed dwelling, move in line with the neighbouring properties and further to the left so as to offer more space between number 46 and 44 Powell Lane. Great care has been taken following the planning officer's advice and suggestions to ensure that the new design fits in sympathetically with the local vernacular, which we were happy to follow. I'm a builder and designer with more than 40 years experience and also a designer presenter for a well-known children's BBC building design programme called Dengineers. I have great pride in the quality of work I produce, and so it is my intention that the building will be constructed to a high standard of design and workmanship, incorporating modern methods, materials and technology to considerably minimise its carbon footprint effect on the environment. Thank you for your time. So, Councillor Thurland.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. That was a really good report. And I mean, the house actually does look lovely. It looks 2 or 3 times the footprint of what was there originally, but the fact that the plot is quite big. The single story part, can we condition that can't go up? Because they just put a single, you said the single story part is there to stop there being such an overshadowing of next door. Can we do that? And can we confirm that that there is enough space all round to meet the disabled standard? Because does it have to be a metre access all the way around a property? Because somebody was questioning that there's only 800 mil on one side. I'm not sure whether that's right for disabled access. And there's an objection from 67 Grosvenor Road, but I couldn't quite work out where 67 Grosvenor Road was on your slides, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take those in reverse order. The Grosvenor Road is Grosvenor Way, so that's a typo, so apologies for that. Grosvenor Way sits to the right of Powell Lane, sort of more towards Primary School, that area.
Yeah, I know now, not Grosvenor Road. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that. Disability standards would be picked up obviously through the building regulations element, but obviously yes, there are those stipulations. Well, I'm not an expert in, but there are obviously those stipulations in new builds, of which this will be one.
But Richard, wait, can we go back to that bit then? So are you saying there isn't enough space, but it's going to be picked up by building regs?
No, I'm not saying that. No, obviously disability and level access to the property and those sort of things would obviously be picked up through building control. From a planning point of view, we've got a generous plot here with ample space for what is proposed. Obviously, the technical details of level access into the site, into the doors of the site and those sort of things will be picked up through building control.
Right. So although if we gave planning permission, it could get to building regs and he couldn't build it like we've passed.
Potentially, yes. Potentially, if there's something that's so fundamental that the plan doesn't meet building regs, then yes, obviously it's uncommon, but schemes do then have to come back towards planning if the amendments that are needed are so substantial that it changes the scheme. Yes.
I think James wanted to say.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor. There's no requirement in relation to having, for disability access, a metre all the way around the house. As Richard's quite rightly said, there are accessibility standards set out, in building regulations for access and disabled, level floors and stuff like that. But no, I think if we consented this, it would be fine for building regs.
Thanks, James.
On the final point, Councillor, about the single-story rear extensions, obviously one of the conditions will be conditioning that we'll be approving the plans as submitted. So that would be with the single-story rear extension. So any sort of extension above those would need permission.
More planning permission. Thank you, Richard.
Councillor O'Hara.
Chair, just 3 questions really. Richard, can I ask you on page 63 about energy and sustainable, that details in relation to energy efficiency and water usage are to be secured by way of a condition. what does that actually mean? Because I know that's one way that developers get round applications and say that they're going to limit water supply, but nobody ever says they're going to use, I don't know, ground heat pumps or things like that. And consider government is encouraging all developers to try to stop using central heating, etc. That won't happen until it becomes more efficient and more cost effective to use the ground source or the heat exchange ventilation type of things. So it's something that we can do within our remit to ask for that, or was it in the wording by saying that it's secured by way of condition? So that was the first thing. And then on page, do you want to answer that first, Richard, or do you want me to just carry on and ask you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit there, but I think I caught the point about energy efficiency and the condition. The condition which we carry forward on new residential dwellings is condition 6 on page 52, which talks about water usage for the new site, and that's derived from policies within the joint core strategy. On the sort of wider issue about energy efficiency, clearly that only sort of moves as fast as government policy, because obviously a lot of it is picked up through building regulations, and obviously talk at the moment sort of in the wider press is about that movement towards alternative heat sources and those sort of things. But obviously as we currently stand, they're not sort of being carried through to sort of either national planning policy or probably more appropriately sort of national building regulations.
Thanks, Richard. It was just so I was bearing in mind, like you say, the ground source heat pumps, or also the document that we've got, the Building for Healthy Life. So kind of those things, which doesn't really apply to, because obviously the large footprint. But bearing that in mind, my concern is, and I know you said there's going to be a condition on there as to whether they want to build, but given that the original plan had the dormer windows, which was quite overbearing and not in keeping with the other houses in the area. Why is it on page 60? If you look at the top of page 60, it says the area at the front has been provided. The area at the front has been provided for parking, but it also says the step nature design, a 2-story element reduced on the station from 10.3 to 7.7 meters, but is increased from 10.3 to 13.6 meters on the northwest elevation. That to try and against the loss of light for the adjacent property, or I know they're back by 2.5 or 2.6 meters, something like that, but I just wondered what the reason was for that. I think I know, but I just thought I'd ask you anyway.
Yeah, sorry again. I think I missed the odd word that was said then. I think the feeds for that clear, but yeah, obviously the redesign, as was covered in the report, and obviously by the applicant themselves in their written speech. Yes, obviously they moved. One of the concerns about the parking and the overall design of the scheme. So the house itself has been moved west away from Polwell Lane towards the community centre to provide that sufficient parking space at the front. But also one of the concerns was the bulk of the development, particularly adjacent to that public footpath. So in the redesign, the sort of stepped approach makes a sort of less sort of massive element on that side, given that that's obviously clearly the most sort of publicly viewed element of the proposal, whilst also obviously still at the same time trying to be respectful for that neighbour that's objected at number 44 and their relationship.
Okay, Richard, does that take into account, the angle of light, because of the way they've changed the design? So the angle of light that hits the house that's adjacent to it, if you're looking at it from the road on the right-hand side, then does that then reduce a lot? I know it's different because they've built the utility room and the sunroom on. So the access to that house to get into the what was the former garage, can they egress into that? They don't go outside, because it looked like there was plants and that there. So that picture was taken through the window and you can walk through into that. So therefore the gate that you can see, is that a gate for them to go down the side of the house, or is that a gate that's been put up so they didn't have to look at the house that's going to be redeveloped?
the picture that I showed you from the breakfast room window with that very small courtyard, that's the area, that's just a very small courtyard. I'm trying to think, I'm going off the top of my head here, but it would be 3.5 metres wide and probably, I'm guessing, so not 2.5 metres deep. And it's the space between obviously that new garage that was built in, it's covered in 1993 or whenever it was, and what was the existing garage, which is now that sunroom and utility, which is the bit that sits further within that neighbouring plot. So that breakfast room window looks across that very small courtyard towards this site. But given that sort of very sort of sheltered view, as you could see from that photograph, given the sort of the nearest elements to them are going to be the single story element, and given that sort of that 6 metre separation distance, it's not considered that the impacts from this development would be so unacceptable to warrant refusal of the scheme.
Sorry, Richard, thank you for that. That's what I was getting at. It's going to be the single story element that's going to be sitting right next to it, isn't it? That's what I was trying to say. But what is the utility room of that adjacent property? Is that directly behind the garage? Is that what you're saying? What's that?
Yeah. Callum, can we go back to that photograph, please? It's probably just easier if I just show you on the photograph so we're clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to the left here is, so that neighbouring property looking across towards the application. So on the left, you've got the garage of greenhouse. This is as you can see, a very sort of small courtyard area, and to the right is what was their original garage, because it was set sort of towards the rear of their plot. That window to the right, as you can see there, serves the utility room. Behind this post on the right hand side, there's a door to that utility room, and to the back of that building is that sunroom where I showed you those patio doors looking down the garden. So I presume that there's access from, if you're in Pole Lane at that neighbouring property, I presume there's access through the garage, come out of this door on the left, through this small courtyard, and then through the other garage. That's it. But as you can see, that's quite a contained sort of view there across to that neighbouring property.
Richard, sorry, I probably didn't make myself. What's the gate there? Where does that go to?
It's not a gate. It's just some trellis.
It's a fence. It's just a fence.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what I was trying to. Is it a gate, or is that just they've put that as part of a fence? So that's all I want.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Sorry, that was probably very drawn out.
Councillor Edwards. Oh, sorry, James. Did you want to say anything? No. Okay, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I do have concerns about the loss of light for number 44 Polwell Lane. You know, if it's going to block off total from their breakfast room, utility room window, then that's their whole left-hand side as you look at it, again in darkness. And I just have concerns that no sunlight is going to go through there and help them out with that. Sorry.
It's important just to point out, obviously on the utility room, that's not a habitable room.
No, I get that, and it's not, but the others are, aren't they? And so therefore we're going to block sunlight for all those other rooms on the left-hand side. I think James wants to speak.
Yeah, Chairman, I was going to make the point previously, but then we kind of moved on, but now this has been brought up again. So this is not the same as members considering, I don't think, at a previous planning application where there was a single, window and the loss of light in relation to an extension. So there's a utility room which is not a habitable room, and the garage area, and then I think to the rear, Richard, if I'm correct, is the area which has two aspects which have French windows. So there's no sort of loss of light to that principal habitable room. And I think, given the fact that it's also set back 6 meters, it can't be that this is really reducing the level of light to those type of rooms that would be, utilised in any great degree.
Okay, I've got no more. Oh, Councillor O'Hara, is it something new?
No, sorry, Chair. It was just that's what I was asking. And James kind of tried to clarify what I was asking: the angle of the light, how it's going to hit neighbouring property. I know it's only going to be a single story at that level, but still the angle of the light, the way the sunlight comes in. At the minute, you can see it's flooded in sunlight. But once you've got that, then affect those doors at the back of the property. Have we got those details or not?
If you look on page 64C of the agenda with the block plan, you'll see that this building doesn't go as far into the plot as those rear patio doors of that neighbouring property. So where the sort of existing house stops is where the sort of transition on this plot is from that 2-storey to the single-storey element, and then you'll see that the single-storey element and all the built form on this plot stops. I'm not measurement, but guessing about 2 metres shy of that French doors at the bottom of that neighbouring property.
Okay, so I've got no more speakers. Is everybody finished? So the proposal is to approve this application. Do I have a proposer and a seconder, or someone raising an amendment? Greg, are you proposing? Yeah, a seconder. Councillor Adams. Okay, Eden, do you want to do a vote?
Thank you, Chair. So this is on the recommendation to approve. Councillor Thurland.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Howells.
For.
Councillor O'Hara.
Against.
Councillor Titcombe. Councillor Adams. And Councillor Morton.
For.
So that is 6 fours and 2 against, Chair.
So that application is approved. So if we go on to the final one, 5.5, Chitham House Catering.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. No update on this item. So this is an application for a small number of works to Chesham House, which is one of the council's own properties. It's a listed building, reported to committee because obviously it's one of our own applications. Nicely summarised within the actual plan itself on page 68C of the report, which is also on the presentation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So yes, so this is the, if you see on 68C, you'll see that there's a number of sort of minor repairs, redecoration and sort of building maintenance elements going on. Of note are 5 windows, BF01, BF02, TF05, TR03 that are going to be replaced. And then as you can see on that annotations on the plan, there's some repairs to the render of the building itself. As is covered in the officer's report, obviously the key consideration being a listed building consent is whether any of these works in themselves or overall impact on the historical significance of the building. Go to the next slide, please. And the next slide again, please. So through the application, they've submitted details which show that there's wooden replacement windows proposed for those windows that are to be renewed. So they're like-for-like replacements and therefore wholly consistent with the existing sort of character and appearance of the building, and therefore no impact on the historical significance of the building there, just part of the council's own sort of ongoing maintenance and upkeep of that building over time. So next slide, please. yeah, it's just showing that one of the windows is a sash window, so that's showing the sash details. And again, that's wooden design and proportions that are consistent with that existing window. Next slide, please. So that's the building itself. The building you'll be probably very familiar with. Had a number of listed building applications over recent years as part of the council sort of use of that building for sort of incubator uses. Next slide, please. And that's, as you've seen in the report, there's some small works going on to maintenance of that sign itself. But again, in isolation or considered cumulatively, they're not impacting on the significance of the building. They're wholly appropriate works that will ensure the building medium and long-term future, and therefore the application is recommended for approval, subject to those conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. I've got nobody requesting to speak, so I'm assuming you're all content. Do I have a proposer and a seconder for the?
I propose.
Jan. Everyone's desperate to go, I think. Eden, do you want to do a vote?
Certainly, Chair. So recommendation for approval, Councillor Thurland.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Howells.
For.
Councillor O'Hara.
For.
Councillor Titcombe.
For.
Councillor Adams.
For.
And Councillor Morton.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Excellent. So that one is approved. And that concludes the night's business. Thank you, everybody, for attending.